Hello, my chicklets. Today we will be reading They Aren't Coming, a story written by myself, artwork done by asofterfan on Tumblr. Information in the bio. Logan's head felt heavy as he attempted to figure out what exactly had happened. He remembered returning home from gathering herbs, but that is where his memory went blank. Had he sustained a head injury? How could he have? He never left anything in his house that was a tripping hazard. Still, with how his head hurt, he needed to make sure he didn't have a concussion. Slowly he began to open his eyes, realizing that his hands were tied behind his back and that he was sitting on a chair. His eyes opened wider. This was not his house. His vision still swam as he began looking around. It seems you're awake. The way the letter S was drawn out, Logan knew exactly who was talking. He didn't even need to look in the man's direction. All of the pieces were beginning to fall into place. He had been kidnapped by Janus, otherwise known as Deceit, and thus, most likely, the king's younger brother, Remus. Oh, is he finally awake? I thought I might have hit him too hard. There are more efficient ways to kidnap somebody. A blow to the head can cause significant... Well, then it's a good thing you have a thick skull. Remus cut Logan off, and normally he would be frustrated, but right now he just didn't have the energy. A sigh left his lips as he began to mutter a spell, attempting to at least ease the dull ache in his head, but nothing came of his words. The gentle warmth that accompanied his powers was missing. Sorry about that. He didn't sound sorry at all. Logan suspected he was just as much of a liar as the rumors said. We just couldn't have you using your powers to try to escape. Remus has it in his head that if we keep you, then his brother and the others will come to rescue you. They must have put a silver collar on him. Silver dampened the effects of magic due to some of its intrinsic properties. Logan had studied it a lot while he was under the employ of the king. Roman had long ago decided that anything he didn't understand was his enemy, which included magic. When King Roman had found out that Logan was a wizard, rather than try to learn from his faithful advisor and useful resource, Roman cast him out of the castle. He had claimed not killing Logan was him being merciful. After 3 months on his own, Logan tended to disagree. Though it was bearable, isolation came with a loneliness that Logan could not shake. Either way, the king would not be coming to his aid. That is conjecture with no basis in reality. What? You're making a guess, and an incorrect one at that. Logan stated again. His head really did ache. The king will not come for me. Then his little companions will. That is also doubtful. You're just being a downer. I'm being realistic. If you believe your hypothesis to be correct, how about a wager? If they do not come for me within a week, you shall grant me my freedom without the collar. Deal! Remus said this before Janus even had the time to reach out his hand and stop the hyperactive man. Sighing as he watched his boyfriend run off. Do you really believe they won't come for you? Janus asked, looking Logan over. They have no reason to. I left the king's service months ago. Janus nodded before turning and going after Remus, leaving Logan tied to the chair. Sure, it would have been wonderful if Logan had someone who would come after him and save him, but he knew that wasn't the case. He would simply save himself by surviving the week. Logan closed his eyes. Hopefully, the silver didn't neutralize his natural healing abilities that came with the magic running through his veins. Day 1. The next morning, Logan awoke on the couch, his head feeling better, but his back and shoulders tight from how he slept. He had to be thankful for the little things, though, and not being forced to deal with head trauma was something he was thankful for. Also, even if it was not the most comfortable sleeping arrangements, they could have left him tied to the chair. That would have been dreadful to his posture and even worse for the current state of his muscles. Opening his eyes, Logan immediately regretted it. He had felt the cold stare of someone, assuming that Janus had been watching him. Instead, he met the wild eyes of Remus, just far enough from his face that Logan didn't feel his breath. "Good morning, Data Bite. Oh, wait, do you bite? That would be interesting." Remus grabbed Logan by the shoulders and pulled him up so that Remus could sit on the couch. It was difficult to sit properly while his hands were still tied, but after a bit he managed to sit up without falling into Remus's lap. "How hard do you bite? Janus bites pretty hard, but I like it." He giggled and continued to ramble nonsense that Logan simply wasn't able to absorb this early in the morning. He needed breakfast and coffee before his brain would absorb anything. And they had fed him last night, so the probability of him getting breakfast was increased. For now, though, he was stuck listening to Remus. His voice was strangely comforting. It was so similar to Roman's, a voice Logan had based his identity around for years, but it was different enough that the pain of nostalgia that voice brought didn't seem to overwhelm him. Logan closed his eyes, allowing himself to relax at the sound of Remus's voice, telling himself that it was just so that he could rest his injured head. "I'm gonna do so many things to Roman when he gets here. Maybe I can bite a chunk of his skin off." If you don't allow your brain to get in the way, your jaw can produce enough power to bite through someone's finger, so a chunk of skin should be no issue. Remus fell silent, and it was only then that Logan realized what he had said in his half-asleep state. "Apologies. I'm aware that facts like that—" "Don't apologize, that was amazing!" Remus was turned towards Logan now, getting uncomfortably close. "What other amazing facts do you know?" Logan was flustered. No one enjoyed hearing him talk about the strange things he had learned through his years of research. They typically only wanted information from him if it was useful. "Well, were you aware that the size of a human's brain is not what plays into our supposed intellectual superiority, but rather the number of ridges and folds within our brain?" Remus was completely enraptured with Logan and the strange facts that he knew about the body, now kneeling on the couch with his hands on the cushion so that he could be as close to Logan as possible without actually touching him. It was strange, but Logan rather enjoyed having a captive audience. "Damn, you're so smart. You obviously left my brother because you were too smart for him." Logan's face fell. The slight gleam in his eyes disappeared as he remembered that event. "I left King Roman's service due to a disagreement in how a certain group of citizens should be treated." "Yeah, that sounds like him." Remus sighed, plopped his butt back onto the couch before putting his hand on his chin. Obviously not wanting to think about that topic, he began to ramble again, and Logan was content to go back to listening. His mind still wandered at the soothing inconsistencies between the newness of Remus's voice contrasted with the hints of familiarity. How long had it been for him to have the chance to sit and listen without consequence if his mind chose to wander? It was pleasant. The rest of the day went by similarly, listening and talking with Remus. At least it didn't leave him bored. Day 2. "I don't care what Remus says. I'm not having you sit in your own filth for several days. Get up. You're taking a shower." Janus's voice cut through Logan's early morning thoughts, but it was a welcome distraction. Remus had not been there when he first woke up, apparently driving out to the forest to hunt for food. Logan had been, instead, left with his thoughts, and he had discovered his own head was not always a pleasant place to be. Janus quickly undid the ropes around Logan's ankles, and Logan felt the need to take advantage of this freedom and stretch his sore muscles. It was going to take him weeks to get his body back into a comfortable alignment after that stagnant state they had been putting him in, but they could have been doing much worse, and thus Logan wouldn't complain. His goal was to stay alive. Once he stood up, Janus turned to walk out of the room, and though he hadn't been told to, Logan assumed he needed to follow. "I've already put out some fresh clothes for you in the bathroom. You are about Remus's size, so they'll fit without too much problem. Though I'm sure that Remus would be happy to see you walking around without any clothes on at all. Logan rolled his eyes. I will take the clothes you have laid out for me. Thank you. It was a force of habit, and he realized he probably shouldn't be adding a thank you to the end of his statement, considering the predicament he was in. If Janus had noticed, he didn't say anything and just opened up the bathroom door, waiting for Logan to step in before undoing the binds around his wrists. Take your time. It's not like I have anything better to do today. Logan wanted to ask if that was sarcasm. He knew the words were strung together in such a way that it could be considered sarcasm, but Logan just wasn't sure by the tone of Janus's voice. He sighed and decided it would be best to take a decently quick shower, as his mind had processed before. They could be a lot more cruel to him than they had been, and Logan didn't want to give them a reason to before his last day here. His fingers traced the collar as he felt around for a way to get it off, mostly just out of curiosity, but he could tell that it was locked in a place using a keyhole that was securely on the back of his neck. Logan didn't know how to pick locks, and even if he did, attempting to do anything that required fine motor skills on the back area of his neck was bound to end poorly. He got out of the shower and quickly dried off, trying not to allow his mind to wander too far. King Roman had always had an issue with his brother Remus and the man called Deceit, but Logan was trying to recall why. It couldn't simply be because Remus chose to date the son of the Dragon Witch, could it? Logan was curious, but it also wasn't his place to try and find these things out. His job was to survive. Remus's green clothing was not his preferred aesthetic, but the clothes were functional and comfortable. It was enough for now. Logan constantly reminded himself survival was key, but he was being treated better than he expected as a prisoner. After reveling in the warmth of the room for just a few more seconds, Logan opened the door, Janus looking at him curiously. Your hair is still wet. I typically dry it using magic, but that is not an option. Janus sighed, pushing Logan back into the bathroom. Sit on the toilet, facing the wall. I will dry your hair. That's really not necessary. I will not have you looking like a drowned rat while you are here. We already have one rat man in this house. Logan didn't argue further. Once he sat down, Janus began to use fire magic to dry Logan's hair. He honestly hated the sound of the hairdryer and preferred it this way. I overheard your conversation with Remus yesterday. You were rather vague in your description of why you left Roman, though I can respect that. Logan was fighting back a sigh, one mixed with the contentment of having his hair touched, as well as the frustration of having to think about Roman. It was not necessarily my intention to hide what happened. I simply do not enjoy talking about it. You are allowed to have secrets, though. I'm sure you did the right thing. I think the whole notion of society and the laws you have to follow for said society is a flawed construct. Really? I don't believe humans could function without a properly structured society. There are many historical documents that show what happens when a society is not structured properly, but I don't believe I've read anything about society not existing at all. Janus smiled a sly smirk of a smile that Logan did not see, intentionally slowing down on his task so that he and Logan would have more time to talk about this fascinating topic. He began to explain his opinions, and Logan always had a rebuttal, but he was also always considerate of Drake's opinion. They didn't really come to an agreement, but it had never been an argument in the first place, just a sharing of ideas. Unfortunately, I'm done with your hair, so I must attend to some other tasks. But it was a pleasure having a conversation with you. Janus reached out his hand, helping Logan up. Whatever Roman did, he lost a very intelligent advisor. Logan went to adjust his tie, which was no longer there. I appreciate the compliment. He felt so vulnerable without his tie. "May I ask a question? Why does the king not like you?" "Multiple reasons. The most obvious being that I am the son of the Dragon Witch, and I'm sure you know the king is not a fan of magic." Logan tensed, so Janus already knew exactly why Logan wasn't working for Roman anymore. "But there is also the problem of me being a selfish prick who is willing to lie if it suits my needs. Roman slapdogs don't like that." Janus smirked, and Logan just gave him a gentle nod. Patton valued honesty above anything, and Virgil did not like secrets. Logan stood, waiting for Janus to tie him up again, but instead, he walked out of the bathroom, calling back to Logan that there was a bookshelf in the living room with many philosophy books he might enjoy. Logan wanted to question this strange behavior, but he didn't. He walked to the living room, found an appropriate book, and began to read as he paced for some light exercise. Day 3. Janus never did end up tying Logan back up, so when he woke up on the couch this time, he felt much less sore and restricted. It would probably be a good idea for him to spend some time stretching today to work out all of the soreness from sleeping on the couch, but he was still happy with his current situation. After rolling his neck a few times and loosening his spine, Logan opened his eyes to see Remus pacing excitedly, occasionally staring out the window. "Logan, are you excited? Today's the day. It has to be. 3 days of preparation is plenty of time, and I'm sure someone noticed the state of your apartment and told my brother." There were so many things Logan needed to unpack in that statement, but he decided to go with what was most important to him. "Did you two leave my apartment unlocked?" "No, of course not. We aren't monsters, but Janus did put a bit of a spell on it so that people will walk into a pocket dimension that looks like your trashed apartment." Logan relaxed. "Thank you." He sighed, closing his eyes. "I would not have enjoyed returning to my house after it being accessible to Ravagers for a week." "Well, you won't have to wait a week. I'm sure they'll be here today." Remus had a twisted smile, and Logan wondered what gave him such faith in people he barely knew. "They aren't coming." "What? You're the smartest person I know. Don't tell Dee. And you're handsome and level-headed. Why wouldn't they come?" Remus was now looking at Logan, eyes fixed on the logical man in front of him. But Logan didn't give him a proper response. He just shrugged, and maybe it was the emptiness in Logan's eyes, but Remus didn't push the subject forward. Instead, a frown formed on his normally excited face, and he turned to the kitchen. "I'm going to eat raw cookie dough until they show up. You are important, Logan. I know they'll come." But nobody came. Day 4. Remus was rather quiet after that, but it wasn't the typical relaxing quiet that Logan enjoyed for reading. It was a tense quiet that Logan felt lost in. He almost let out an audible sigh of relief when Janus came in and put down a chessboard on the table in the living room, effectively breaking the silence. "We are playing chess." "Very well." "Oh, no. Not you, Logan. I want you to observe the madness that this gremlin believes is a proper game of chess. I have never had a more frustrating opponent in my life. You should attempt to play chess with Patton." The mention of his cookie-loving friend hurt, but he knew Patton would never betray Roman. Love made you do strange things. Logan marked his book and sat it down before going over to the table, watching as Remus looked at the pieces excitedly. Just wait. The game was indeed strange. Logan would occasionally make reasons for why he was allowed to perform an illegal move, and Janus would roll with it. He was obviously an excellent strategist because he still managed to get Remus into checkmate, but Remus just smirked. "You should have been paying more attention, Dee. My kingdom is a matriarchy. The puppet king holds no power. Take him out. Do us a favor. Then the queen can finally marry for love." Janus just sighed. "See, this is what I have to put up with." The two of them looked at Logan, who had a blank look on his face. There was silence in the room again until Logan burst out laughing, quickly trying to control himself and failing miserably. I, I have never seen anyone play chess like that. His laugh echoed around the room, and through the tears in his eyes, Logan missed the soft smile that Remus gave him. Finally, Logan began to take in deep breaths, controlling his laughter. That was rather entertaining. Logan fought against it, but he couldn't keep the light smile off of his face. There was a bit of a silence once again as Logan picked up one of the chess pieces and rolled it around in his fingers. A matriarchy. I wasn't expecting that twist. I told you he's frustrating. Janus stood. Remus, come with me to the kitchen and we will get lunch together. Logan was too focused on the piece to notice the look that the two of them gave each other. He was fascinated by Remus's playing style. Logan had never really been creative, but Remus had life stories for each of the pieces, tragic reasons for why they were fighting this war. Logan closed his eyes and put his head on the table. If things were different, if Remus and Roman got along, what would a game of chess between the two of them look like? It didn't matter. Those types of hypotheticals didn't have value, as the likelihood of them coming to pass was close to nil. A sigh left his lips. You knew they wouldn't be coming for you. Do not allow yourself to succumb to such trivial feelings. His nails sunk into his arm as he just sat there for a few more minutes, almost jumping when he felt Janus touch his shoulder. You look tired. Come on. You can sleep in the spare room. Careful, Janus. You're beginning to treat me like a guest and not a prisoner. Logan wasn't sure where that bout of sarcasm came from, but Janus smiled. Don't get used to it. He took a small nap, but came back out for lunch where they continued to play board games, attempting to adapt to Remus's ever-changing rules. Logan could feel the cold left in his heart begin to chip a bit. He was enjoying this immensely, though he wasn't sure that he would ever admit it. Day 5. My little Loki bear, wait here for me, okay? Mommy is going to go grab something from the shop and I'll be right back. Don't leave. Okay. Logan sat on the edge of the fountain, his feet swinging as he waited for his mother to come back. She had promised she would. He knew she would, but she didn't. A few people passed by, asking if he was okay, and he always gave the same answer. I'm waiting for my mommy to come back. Then he would give them a smile, and most of them would continue on their way. Hours passed, and the day slowly began to turn to night, and Logan shivered. But he was a good boy. He would wait right here. He would wait for his mommy. Then a guard walked up. Little boy, where are your parents? Mommy said she would be right back. The guard frowned, sitting down next to Logan. How long ago was that? He had to think. It had been a while. When the sun was that high, he said, pointing to the sky, and the guard's frown deepened. Well then, you must be hungry. He pulled out a snack bar and handed it over to Logan. You don't have allergies, right? Logan shook his head. He didn't think so, but he wasn't really sure what allergies were. He was hungry, though, so he greedily took the candy bar and ate it. How about we wait at the guard's office? We can leave your mommy a note here. I'm sure she wouldn't want you getting sick. Logan hesitated, but slowly nodded. Okay. He yawned, stretching as he stood up, taking the guard's hand only to see his mother in the distance. Mommy! He said, waving at her, but she turned and began to walk away from him. Mommy? She disappeared into the night, and the guard stopped him from running after her. Logan's eyes were filling with tears, his head turned to the floor. Get out! His head snapped up, looking up to the throne where King Roman sat, a man who had once been his friend. There was no kindness or friendship in his eyes now. Roman looked at him with nothing but anger. Roman, if I could... Do not address me with such familiarity. You've been stripped of that privilege. Your Highness, if I could just there is nothing to explain. You dabbled in the forbidden art of magic and you hid it from me. From us? How could I ever trust you again? Logan flinched. It was not my choice. There is always a choice. Get out. Roman growled and Logan felt himself falling. He had been born with magic. He hadn't chosen these powers. He had been learning about Silver, trying to suppress his powers. He was trying. Logan sat up in his bed, breath heavy as the memory still plagued his mind. His chest ached, and he knew it was all due to emotions. He hated this. There was no easy fix for emotional pain. Logan, are you okay? By reflex, Logan threw a pillow towards the door that had come swinging open. Apologies. He went to grab his glasses from the nightstand. It was just a nightmare. A nightmare? Dee, we got a code black! Remus shouted, holding the pillow Logan had thrown at him. Now you can't go through a code black alone. Come here. He didn't really give Logan a choice as he dropped the pillow on the bed and threw Logan over his shoulder. What are you doing? Logan asked, flustered. We have specific nightmare protocols. They walked into the living room before Remus dumped Logan on the couch and began pulling DVDs out of the TV cabinet until he found a black box sitting in the back. Remus, did you say code black? Janus asked with a yawn, rubbing the sleep out of his human eye. Yep, I got the movies and blankets if you get the snacks. Logan looked at him in confusion. It is the middle of the night. You really don't need... Shh. We have to get rid of the negative energy that creates nightmares. This was illogical. What negative energies? Self-doubt, loneliness, overthinking. That's why I just don't think ever. Logan blew air out of his nose. He highly doubted that, but he knew he wasn't going to win this fight, so he didn't try. Janus came back into the room with a bowl of popcorn and curled into the blanket nest Remus had constructed. Despite dating, Janus sat on Logan's right and Remus sat on his left. He was sandwiched in between them. He wouldn't admit it, but the warmth was comfortable, and in between the two of them, he felt less alone. Logan began to relax to Remus's commentary on the cheesy romantic comedy he had put on. Occasionally, he or Janus would throw popcorn at the screen when a character had done something immensely stupid. It made him chuckle softly, and before he knew it, Logan was allowing his eyes to slide closed, falling asleep in between the two people who had kidnapped him. He shouldn't be enjoying their presence nearly as much as he did, but for the first time in a long time, he felt someone actually cared for him. In the morning, he could feel fingers in his hair, gently rubbing his head, soothing all of his doubts. Part of him wanted to relax and fall back to sleep, but he could hear Remus whispering, They aren't coming, are they? That was right. He was just here as bait. He needed to remember that. He wasn't here to be their friend. Logan yawned, showing to them that he was awake, and Janus didn't respond to Remus's question. Good morning. I appreciate what you two did last night to help me. Would it be sufficient for me to make breakfast as a repayment? That isn't necessary. I know it's not necessary, but I would like to. Janus nodded. Feel free. Quickly, Logan got up, making his way to the kitchen so that he could fall apart. How had he fallen for his captors? He wasn't some damsel who would fall to Stockholm Syndrome, but for the first time in a long time, he found people who made him laugh, who made him happy, who wanted to know what he had to say. This was not the first time he had had nightmares, but it was the first time he had come out of it and not been alone. If he had spent time with them under different circumstances, would Logan be ready to jump into their arms already? He pulled out the carton of eggs from the refrigerator. Emotions are really the bane of my existence. Day 6. Why haven't they come to get him? Remus was pacing the living room by the time Logan left the spare bedroom. Despite Janus's words to not get comfortable, he had been offered it again last night, and Logan could make a logical assumption that he would be offered the room again tonight. I've already informed you, Remus. There is no logical reason for them to rescue me. The king and I had a falling out. Patton is loyal to the king, just as the king is to him, and it is difficult for Virgil to go against his wishes. Attempting to go against King Roman is very anxiety-inducing, especially after they had all been present to see what happened to Logan. That's bullshit! Not only are you smarter than anyone else he has in that play court of his, but you are handsome, and you have this thing where you just know what to say, like that recall man. It's impressive. You know so much about so many different subjects, and you have this thirst to learn. I mean, seriously, who reads philosophy books just for the hell of it? Sure, Janus did, but Janus was also a nerd. Remus would never understand why either of them would spend excess time learning about something that wasn't immediately beneficial to them. While I do appreciate the compliments, it is not necessary. Logan had realized that Janus and Remus were both big on self-confidence, and being reassured that who you were was perfectly fine. Logan appreciated that, but their words didn't always sink in. I have known since I was a child that I am not someone other people value. Remus stopped pacing, watching as Logan grabbed another book from the shelf. Even with his back turned to Remus, Logan could feel his eyes running over every inch of his body. He didn't understand why those words would have come as a surprise to Remus. Logan was a source of knowledge and information. That was it. Even when he had been living with the king, that had been the extent of his usefulness. Logan sat back down at the table in the living room. He watched as Remus walked towards the bedroom where he was sure Janus was working. Logan hadn't meant to make Remus upset. He actually wanted to hear the ramble of the creative man's voice as he read. He wasn't even sure what had set Remus off. Logan was just stating facts. Rather than opening the book, Logan sat his head on the table, fighting against the swell of emotions that was threatening to overcome him. He really hadn't expected the others to come to his rescue. He hadn't expected any of them to come find him. He knew logically there was no reason for them to help him, but maybe because of Remus's excitement, he had hoped. It was always foolish to hope. Day 7. Logan had not slept at all the night before. The week was over, and he had won his freedom. He heard the click of the collar coming off, feeling his magic power race through his body again. It was a wonderful feeling. So why did he feel so empty? Remus wouldn't look at him, and he was surprisingly quiet. Logan knew that meant Remus had a lot on his mind, so he decided not to say anything. He wanted to say goodbye. Well, Logan, we are sorry for the inconvenience. Logan shook his head. Strangely, I enjoyed my time here with you. I do hope you and Remus continue to be happy. Janus had washed Logan's clothes so that he could wear them home, and Logan turned around to walk away. No one called after him. No one reached out their hand to stop him from leaving. He wasn't even sure if that's what he was hoping for, but he had been hoping for something. He knew better, though. He was not meant to be loved. He was not the type of person people enjoyed being around. A part of his mind begged for Logan to turn around, begged for him to go back and ask if he could stay with them, or at least spend more time with them. But Logan was stubborn, and he wasn't going to get himself into another situation where he would be abandoned again. He finally got to his apartment, dispelling the illusion and seeing the door was indeed locked. He was thankful for that. It was another indication that Remus and Janus were not nearly as bad as Roman liked to complain that they were. Still, they had trashed his house a little bit when kidnapping him, and there were a lot of things that he needed to straighten up. Logan started to get to work, sweeping the herbs off the floor, picking up scattered trash. He leaned down and picked up a book that was knocked off of his shelf, putting it back and tracing his fingers over the spines of the other books. He didn't want to leave them. He hadn't wanted to leave them. He didn't want to be alone. Logan slowly began to slide to the floor, hiding his head in his knees. He wanted to read and share ideas with Janus. He wanted to listen to Remus's strange way of playing board games. He wanted to see the sparkle in Remus's eyes as they talked about weird facts. He wanted to practice magic with Janus. He couldn't cry. He didn't need to cry. It's better this way. They would have abandoned you as well. I wouldn't say that. I'm very possessive of those things that are mine. The way that the S was drawn out, Logan snapped his head up to look at Janus, who was sitting nonchalantly against the door frame. Though I was thinking, rather than kidnapping you this time, we could just ask nicely. Logan stood up, straightened out his shirt. We? Hiya, Remus said, poking his head in. I figured if my bastard brother and his lackeys don't love you, then we would. You don't need to feel... We do not feel obligated, Logan. We want you to be by our side. Janus's hand was held out in front of him. We came to pick you up. Do you want to come home? For a brief moment, Logan hesitated, but then he took Janus's hand. That would be satisfactory. And that was the last day that Logan was alone. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Once again, this story is called They Aren't Coming. It was written by myself, and there will be a link in the description. I hope you all have a great day.